Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go! Welcome to another installment of Ballsy Uncut. However you're consuming this podcast, audio-wise, video-wise, in real time, or on the various platforms later on, I do appreciate it. Tell all your friends. If you want a sponsor, you can DM me. And if you want a shirt, $25 going to ALS, the proceeds to Glenn Love's ALS Foundation. I'd be happy to pass the money on to him. It's $25. Ricky just got a shirt. Chris just got a shirt. You can too. You can DM me at The Real Ballsy on X, at Ballsy Uncut on X, on Facebook at Michael Ball, or Ballsy Uncut on Facebook, or at The Real Ballsy on Instagram, or Ballsy Uncut on Instagram, or you can always text me 306-526-7979. Just trying to help out a guy who gave of his body and some of his youth in the CFL to entertain us with Calgary, won a Grey Cup in 2014 with Montreal, with the Riders among the 5 teams he played with. Glenn Love, the Love Life ALS Foundation. Let's get right to it. Now, normally I start the show by talking or doing like a gospel according to Ballsy. This, I'm gonna call it Ballsy's Best and Busts for week 1 as we get set for week 2 here. Winnipeg and BC going to kick it off at Princess Auto Stadium. Here we go. The best from week number 1. Nathan Rourke. He looks dialed in. He looks like he's got that rhythm back to the Canadian game. It is tough to go from the American game to the Canadian game in so many ways, especially at quarterback. In fact, we have a new segment here weekly on the show called Airing It Out with former Rider, and then briefly with the BC Lions, Isaac Harker, quarterback. He's going to join me to talk about CFL football and quarterbacking on a pretty regular basis. So we've got that to talk to him about. Nathan Rourke, and the fact he looks like he's dialed in now on one playbook, in one system, one game, the Canadian game. That's going to be a nice matchup today as Buck Pierce returns to Winnipeg now, this time as a head coach of the BC Lions, where he got his playing career started, played for the Bombers, and then coached with the Bombers as the offensive coordinator on Mike O'Shea's staff. So that was my first best of the week, Nathan Rourke. My second best was Thomas the Train, as they call him, Thomas Bertrand Houdon. Joined the Riders while I was up in the broadcast booth, and it was nice to see him break off some runs. Good Canadian running back out of, I believe it was Delaware, if I'm not mistaken, and played his college ball. And Thomas the Train, Thomas Bertrand Houdon, looking pretty good. Now, he's been practicing off and on this week. Not sure if he'll be kind of a combination with A.J. Ouellette, or they're going to go with the newly signed Kadeem Carey. We'll see as we get closer to game time in Hamilton. But Thomas the Train of the Riders, Bertrand Houdon, my second best of week 1. And my third best was former Rider, current Montreal Alouettes special teams demon, Alexander Gagne. He had 7 tackles in their game against the Toronto Argonauts. Alexander Gagne, 7 special teams tackles. That's a season for some guys. So congratulations to that special teams demon. That special teams work is not for the faint of heart. They are the real ditch diggers of professional football, especially the Canadian game, where the third facet of the game means something. So Rourke is a best, Bertrand Houdon a ballsy best, and Alexander Gagne a ballsy best. So there's your Ballsy's best. How about Ballsy's busts? The Red Blacks line play. Offensive and defensive lines, not spectacular against the Riders. Their tackling wasn't great, but in general on defense. But, I mean, you could say that about a lot of teams because they didn't get to hit with a lot of padding and nothing like the old days. So it's kind of stupid in football. You can't really perfect. I know it's about player safety, but you can't perfect one of the key elements of football, which is tackling. Full-on tackling. So Ottawa's line play in particular, not great. They're going to have to be a lot better offensively against the Montreal Alouettes, who I've got beating Ottawa because Drew Brown is out. He kind of got on one of the quarterback sacks the Riders had. He kind of got rolled up, looked like a hip injury, some sort of hip pointer. He will not play this game. Matthew Schiltz, the former Tiger Cat Stampeder, gets to start at quarterback for Ottawa. Another bust for week 1. and I don't mean this harshly, but I expected more from Trey Ford. Trey Ford's getting a longer leash with more money. He got the bag, so he gets, the bag, relatively speaking, I get it. Not as much as like a Kalaros or a Kelly, but he's well over $300,000. He's the Canadian quarterback. It's got some pressure on him for that, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. The Elks are turning to him, and they're going to give him a long leash, I believe. He can make 3 to 5 flash plays a game, which are outstanding. Make the highlight reel. SportsCenter's talking about him, but he's got to be better at throwing from 4 to 10 yards. Eventually, in pro football, you have to be able to throw from the pocket. You can't run around like a chicken with your head cut off. I think he had like a 2.79 release, so 2.79 seconds to get the ball away. That's a little too long in professional football. That's the difference between a complete pass and an interception or a breakup. So I would consider Trey Ford a ballsy bust for week 1. Doesn't mean he can't rebound. And the third one, instant replay, and the penalty call on Deontay Williams in that BC game. So Deontay Williams, Nebraska Cornhusker. I liked him when he played with the Riders. He was up and down a little bit, but you'd expect that from younger players. He absolutely pops the Elks receivers at Arkell, 86, just boom. Doesn't hit him high, doesn't hit him low, hits him right in the upper chest. Hit on a defenseless receiver, though. It's like I said, you can't play football in this league anymore. You can't play defense. Can't hit him high, can't hit him low. That's why a lot of these offensive stats are bullshit. They really are. Like, receivers have just a free run down the field. They can be offside at the snap a lot of times with the waggle, although the league's getting better at cutting down on that. I'll admit that. But still can be offside. You get the running start. DBs can't put their hands on you or the flag comes up. And now you can't hit a guy. Why do we even have defense? So that's one bust. And equally tied for third, Ballsy's busts, replay. The CFL doesn't have NFL money, never will. I don't want to compare it that way. But if you're going to do replay, invest in it so you can maybe get a few more camera angles and get it right. That's why the call on the field is so important. Luke Mulliner, my old color commentator on the Riders broadcast, he used to say the initial call is so important because a lot of times they're just going to have inconclusive because of the lack of cameras and the angles they got, and they'll just go with the ruling on the field. It's kind of a chicken shit way out, but it's true. And so it looks like Nick Arbuckle throws a pass, and they replay it, and they say it's a fumble. There's no way that's a fumble. That is an incomplete pass. Even Montreal looked embarrassed to be awarded the touchdown with, is it Ademi Berglund that scooped it up? Anyway, replay. Get it right or don't use it. That's it. Get it right. Get things right or don't do it. Do it right or don't do it. So my parents always preached. So there you go. That's Ballsy's Week 1, Ballsy's Bests and Busts. Coming up, Ballsy's Best Bets with the Dean at the Edwards School of Business. Our Dean on the show, Keith Willoughby, who he will do CFL simulations once again for us and the CFL.ca website, but he waits about 3 to 4 weeks to get data on that. We'll get some discussion from him about that, the sports nerd, and he's a well-educated football fan, so we'll chop it up and make some picks for this week. 4 games, of course, in the CFL. We're also going to hear from a Hall of Famer. That's right. Frank McCrystal of the University of Regina Rams and Regina Rams junior ranks, was the face of both teams. He's going to be the 4th Ram, I believe, to go into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. I put the guy's paperwork in about 6 years ago and made a couple calls and tried to get some help to get him in. I called a couple of years ago on it. They said, no, he's still in the queue. And I'm like, well, can we get him in before he dies? Now, he's not sick. He's not dying. It was kind of a joke, but it's like a lot of times we induct these guys after they're dead. Like, shame on Major League Baseball. I know I'm not comparing Frank McCrystal to a degenerate gambler like Pete Rose. And Pete had some other demons, but Ty Cobb wasn't exactly the greatest guy. There's a lot of bad dudes in halls of fame, okay? Anyway, Frank's not a bad dude, but what I'm getting at is they knew Pete Rose dies and the next day he's going into the Hall of Fame. Come on, that's just an absolute disrespectful move by the worst commissioner in sports, Rob Manfred. Okay. Anyway, Frank McCrystal, I called and said, can we get him in? And then he just reached out to me and said, hey, Ballsy, I'm pretty sure, because I'd mentioned to Frank, hey, man, I hope this works. Like when Brian Towers went in, and deservedly so, is the all-time winningest U Sports coach when he went in. I'm like, well, Frank McCrystal combined has as many, if not more, wins in junior and U Sports than Brian Towers. Brian Towers had the run of the province and had 3 Vanier Cups the U of S Huskies had before Frank McCrystal brought the Rams to U Sports, and then they didn't win another one and haven't won one since. I mean, they got a great program with Scott Flory and Mason Nice, but let's not deny it. They couldn't have their pick of the litter of all of Saskatchewan. And Southern Saskatchewan has some great players that elect to stay in Regina. So I'm like, I got to get this. I'm going to see if I can't get this going. So I had a couple of other people help me. I know I called Tom Shepard, who obviously known well in league circles. And so he helped me direct me, and I'm not sure if you made a call in there too. But yeah. Frank McCrystal going into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. There's Roger Aldag, Jim Hobson, God rest his soul, Gord Curry, once again, God rest his soul, greatest amateur coach of all time, in my opinion, and Frank McCrystal. Now, 4 Rams being represented. And if you could put a tandem in, I'd put Frank McCrystal and Bernie Schmidt in together. They're 1A and 1B. But Frank gets to go in. Congratulations to him. He will join us on the show. And as I said, we have Isaac Harker joining us in a new segment we're calling Airing It Out with a former CFL quarterback. We'll chop it up from the quarterback position through the quarterback's eyes with Isaac Harker. This is Ballsy Uncut. So the news came out today. Frank McCrystal is going into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. I think it's great. He is one of the winningest coaches in junior football. Got his team into U Sports and built it into a very healthy program. It's gone through its challenges lately. I understand they've had some off-field stuff, but the actual, to be in a landlocked prairie school that's an undergraduate school, they're basically the equivalent in pro sports of a small market, Keith. I've always said this. Like, in order for the Rams to win, everything has to go right because, it's tough to get players to play here, yet they seem to put a lot of guys in the pros, and not just the CFL, but the NFL in the past.
Exactly. You think of some of the NFL defensive linemen that have come through the Rams program. I think much like when Brian Towers went into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, I think this is a clear indication of the legacy of leadership that we see in university and junior football in this province. Of course, I'm a Saskatoon person, so my allegiance with the University of Saskatchewan, but I got to give props to the Rams, Thunder, and their entire legacy for what they've done for excellence. In fact, Ballsy, you look at the number of pros playing in the Canadian Football League right now. A lot have come from that Regina minor program through the high schools, through the university and junior ranks. To me, that is the best indicator of success on the field, but also you see it in the off-the-field leadership demonstrated by these graduates.
So, and I have all the respect in the world for all 4 programs, Huskies, Hilltops, Rams, Thunder. But you're a numbers guy. When Frank McCrystal and the board of directors and everybody brought that football team to U Sports, or it was CIS back then, like Brian Towers and the Huskies, they were still formidable, but they didn't have the run of the place because the province was split now. Before, the Huskies could get the Saskatchewan kids if they were going to university, not anymore. And so I think that that's something to consider too when he goes in just after Towers.
Exactly, and I think the Huskies, we've won 3 Vanier Cups in our career, in our lifetime: 1990, 1996, and 1998. But again, post-1998, pre-1998, Ballsy, the Huskies had the luxury of those fifth-year players from the Hilltops and the Rams who could suit up and play for the Huskies. And now, again, university football is divided, and you see it's had an impact. in terms of
Yeah.
our ability. We've made it to the Vanier a couple times for the Huskies, but not been able to climb the mountain.
So I haven't been to a Rider game since I left my post in the perch up top, okay? I've only been to that stadium twice, once as a voice of the Thunder and once when the Dinos played there. My kid didn't play and it was an ugly game, so I came at the end to say goodbye to him. How are you doing? See you, son. Whatever. So I've made comments from afar, but you're an actual season ticket holder and a diehard fan.
Mm-hmm.
Is it much ado about nothing, or should we start to be a little concerned when the Riders have a home opener and it looks pathetic on TV?
It's a great question, Ballsy. You can look at all the factors that lined up for last week's home opener against Ottawa. A Thursday night game, that's a tough draw. Eastern opponent, tough draw. Early June, very tough draw. In my mind, the league starts far too early. It needs to start around July 1st. But I think underlying all of this, Ballsy, is the fact that me as a season ticket holder, I get worried. Ballsy, I get worried when I probably see 21,000 bums in seats in a stadium. Ballsy, it wasn't too long ago that the Labor Day Classic sold out in minutes. And your home opener was sold out well before the game was played. To me, gone are the days, in my mind, when the Riders can claim. And again, I'm a season ticket holder. I'm Rider Nation. I bleed green and white. But I got to tip my cap to the Bombers. To me, right now, when I look at the eyeballs on the stands, they're the loudest park in the nation. To me, they're drawing better than we're drawing in terms of home field attendance. I think this, to me, is a cause for some concern, and I'm hoping it's much better for the Saturday June game against BC. But I tell you, it wasn't a really good look to be in the stands on that Thursday night against Ottawa and have the place not have the juice and the vibe that it should for a Rider home opener.
So the bring them out. I'll start with the bring them out. Okay, I don't want to belabor this too much, but I start with the bring them out. Now I know back in the day at Taylor Field, Old Mosaic Stadium, you had the helmet and it swung open and it was all that. It was kind of old school, right? Mm-hmm. I miss the helmet. I miss not seeing the guys when they come out, like the mystique. So some of that's taken away because there's no helmet, probably for safety and fireworks and all that stuff, but also just the setup coming down the tunnel and they got the elaborate camera following them and everything. But it just doesn't seem to have the same pop when they come out. It doesn't set the tone early, in my opinion.
It doesn't. And again, I've been going to games, for years, but especially in the Bring 'em Out era, I've been a season ticket holder. So I've seen dozens and dozens of games, again, at the old Taylor Field and the new Mosaic. It just, again, a handful of years ago, there was a roar when the fans anticipated that the team was going to come out. And now it's like we need to be coached. We look up on the big screen, okay, the team's coming out, and now let's cheer. And not everybody's cheering and not everybody's standing up. To me, it's a chance for the Rider Nation to stand up as one. And that's where, again, maybe it's the smaller crowd. Maybe it's the fact that there are people right now that are optimistic but cautiously so. Maybe it's people that still don't trust the team. And you think back to the couple of years we had were really sour. I think that's left a stench that's followed this team that still is lingering into the 2025 season.
Okay, they did win. And we'll get to our picks here in a minute. They won. It was a sloppy yet entertaining game. Like, I don't think you can complain when you get to 57 points. I thought there was some really good things the Riders did. Some things obviously they can clean up, giving up over 400 yards passing. I'll be interested to see if AJ Ouellette plays, if Milligan, they're cleared to practice, but as we talk now, not cleared to play. But, what'd you make of that signing of Kadeem Carey coming over from, he was cut out of training camp with Toronto. I was hoping they might, if you're a Rider fan, go after Walter Fletcher, who is a returner and a running back and cheaper. Well, I don't know, cheaper, but younger, 28.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised they brought in somebody. Obviously, to me, Carey or Fletcher, I would have been happy with either of them. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge with AJ, again, he had 3 carries for 21 yards in the home opener. Showed real good burst on one of the runs. I think it was like a 13 or 14-yard gain. But I made the joke last year, Ballsy, that he looked like the before guy in an Advil commercial. And this year, again, he got popped really strong on one of the hits. And obviously, football's a contact sport. So the concussion protocol, we'll see if he plays on Saturday in Hamilton. But it's a situation that, to me, the Riders recognize that this is their year to cash in. and we don't want to lose any ground in the standings for what should be a very competitive West Division. Hence the signing of Carey to at least give some, whether it's insurance or on the field performance at the running back position.
So you need a lot of people to get through a season. This just isn't for the Riders. I think, first, I'll say this. I think Dan Farthing is, you won't find a better strength and conditioning coach, the former Husky great. Like he's good, and I can speak to that personally, okay? But, man, what is up with all these injuries year after year after year? Like, what are we doing here?
Ballsy, I don't know. I don't have the kinesiology background that Farthing does, so I'll tip my cap to obviously the people in the strength and conditioning program. But when you lose Gagnon before the season, when you lose McEwen before the season, Peyton Collins, again, we'll see how long he's out. Brammer's been dinged up. That's just the O-line position where we've had some challenges. KSB looks like he could be out for a long time. CJ Avery could be out for a long time. I know there's depth with the team, but I think last year we saw it with the offensive line. You can get to an eventual position where you really start to wonder about the team's success on the field. That's why, again, I look back last week, I'm cautiously optimistic. Yes, it's a win. We're 1-0, but I'm concerned about the injuries and how that might impact the prospects going forward.
Okay, so let's get to Ballsy's Best Bets, where I get somebody to help me sometimes pick. Now, you're the CFL simulation king, but you don't start right now. You're a numbers guy, so you got to let some of the numbers build up, right? Like a trend, so to speak?
Exactly. So typically we don't do the first simulations till the beginning of July. Usually the first, let's say, quarter of the season, the first 4 games, because there's so much turnover in CFL rosters, that it's really it would be inaccurate to use the 2024 rosters or success to gauge what's going to happen this year. So I need a few games under the belt before the computer model can really be unleashed and turned loose.
Yeah, and I've said this a number of times. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't agree. I think the first 2, because of the short preseason, I think the first 2 games in the regular season are an extension of the preseason.
Well said. Look, the Riders, we did not fumble the ball that much last year. And the game in Ottawa, we had the fumble where Emilus had the ball ripped out of his hands, and then I believe it was Keyshawn Johnson had another fumble. Hopefully we can put that into some early season jitters. But the game last Thursday, it was sloppy. It was a situation where the Riders fall behind. They're snoozing. They have the strangest field goal attempt in Rider history. I think when Couch has spun the laces the wrong way, and they're down 7-0, and then you look and we're up 31-14. We think we got this a cakewalk, and then Ottawa shows some life late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get to these games, and we got a chance to see the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the British Columbia Lions. Now we'll start with British Columbia. Nathan Rourke looks like he's got his CFL timing and rhythm back. I picked him. And I had 5 most impactful offseason moves, and that was I think I had that at number 2, if I'm not mistaken. Buck Pierce and Nathan Rourke combo. I think it's going to work out well this year.
Yeah, the Lions, to me, I see a lot of depth right now and a lot of parity within the West Division. In fact, across the league. But if you look right now at the West, BC, a good opening game victory against Edmonton. To me, they're a dangerous squad. They've got a quarterback who can be one of the best signal callers in the league. They've got an explosive offense, so they're going to be a challenge for any team this year in the CFL. So
let's pick this game now. I have a media cap to wear and a father's cap to wear. My son is not playing in the game for Winnipeg. Zach Collaros isn't playing in the game either. That's a bigger deal than Ethan Ball not playing, let me tell you. So I think Chris Streveler's a great athlete. I think he's great, from what I've been told, great in the locker room and a good all-around solid guy and unstoppable on third down. But it's going to have to be won by the Winnipeg defense, I think. I always generally lean to the team with better quarterbacking, and I'm going to go with Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions. That just goes to show I don't just pick Winnipeg every week. I'm going BC in this game. I think they'll win somehow.
Ballsy, I'll give you 5 words in this one. Never go against the Bombers. I got the Bombers by 14 in this game.
Oh, wow.
to me, they're Winnipeg for a reason. W stands for something. Five consecutive Grey Cups. And again, I know they lost the last three, but they lost two of those Grey Cups in the last seconds. And in the 2024 season, basically, Claros was like had half a shoulder at the end of the game. There's something with the culture of that team, with Mike O'Shea's leadership. They get stuff done. Last year, they were a B plus version of the Bombers, and they still got first place. So never go against the Bombers. Opening, it's their first game. It's their home opener. Lines on a bit of a short week. I got the Bombers by 14.
Okay, so we differ there. The guy who has somebody in blue and gold picks against the blue and gold for the first time, and you're going the other way. Thing is, too, Winnipeg is a lot like. So the vibe in Winnipeg is a lot, because I was at a preseason game. It's a lot like the Riders when Hobson ran them from 2000 and whatever to 2014. You get the same vibe, the same home field advantage. That canopy keeps all the sound in. It definitely is loud. And it reminds me a lot of Commonwealth Stadium when the Eskimos were good. You go in there and you were lucky to get a win. So you might be onto something there. It's not going to be easy, and a lot of teams already go in there thinking that they're down by 7 points mentally. That's how it is. The Riders can't seem to do it there. BC can't seem to do it there.
Yeah, again, maybe to use an NFL comparison, to me, the Bombers are the Kansas City Chiefs of the CFL.
Yeah,
they are that good. And again, it pains me to say that. I love the rivalry, but I got to tip my cap to the Bombers. They've shown us the past 5-6 years what it means to be a championship franchise.
Davis Alexander wasn't spectacular, but he was solid enough to get them the win against the Toronto Argonauts, a game that was never in doubt. They're going into Ottawa and that geographical rivalry there. Be like a Regina Saskatoon matchup, if you want to picture that. And Ottawa won't have Drew Brown and Adai, their safety's out for the year with an elbow injury. But Drew Brown, who hurt himself here, got twisted up on one of the, I think, 6 quarterback sacks the Riders got. So I got to go with Montreal here. I'd pick Montreal anyway, even though I like what I saw from Drew Brown. I was trying to decide who was more disappointing, Ottawa or Edmonton for me in week 1, and it would be a coin flip.
Before the season, you and I chatted, Ballsy. I had Ottawa as my sleeper dark horse team in the East, and I've got Ottawa in this game by 7. Okay. And again, I know no Drew Brown, but they've got some athletes on the offensive side of the ball. Justin Hardy, William Stanback, Geno Lewis, Khalil Pimpleton. To me, they've got some cast of characters in offense that they can stretch the other team. And they're playing at home. And again, maybe it's not the same as like a Winnipeg, Saskatchewan crowd sort of, but hey, they are at home. And I like Ottawa. I love Coach Dice. And I like them to go 1-1 to basically right the ship early in the season.
Well, and you'd like to see them. I mean, they were pretty good defending their turf last season. They were good on home turf, and but they got to get back to playing some, consistent football. They did make the playoffs last year, so that's good on them. So I hope they can keep that trajectory going. I didn't like how they looked on both sides of the lines, though. Their O-line didn't look great, and their D-line looked old and unathletic.
Well said. And again, maybe just a chance to sort of regroup and play maybe up to more of their potential against Montreal. Again, Montreal, tough team. Don't get me wrong. I think they're one of the class teams in the East, but Ottawa just has, to me, that secret sauce this year. I think it could be their year.
All right, so the Calgary Stampeders get off to a win over the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I had Calgary winning. I went 2-2 last week. I had the Rider game wrong, and I had the Elks beating BC, believe it or not. So those are the two I got wrong. I got this one right. Calgary over Hamilton. They're in Toronto, another Eastern matchup. Vernon Adams Jr. looked good at I said earlier this week with Eddie Steele, I said, Vernon Adams, I love him. I think he's a great guy. He's a great athlete. He's got to find a way eventually to hold on to a starting job somewhere. But at times, he's like young Henry Burris. He's good enough to keep both teams in the game.
Yeah, he is. They are. I know Calgary the past 2 years has been unlike the Calgary version that we've seen the past 2 decades. So this was obviously not up to their standards. I liked what I saw from Calgary. Again, I know it was beating Hamilton at home. I think you'd expect that situation, but VA brings them the stability that maybe they didn't have last year with Jake Mayer.
Yeah, so I got Calgary in this game. Who do you got?
Me too. I'm going to go Calgary. Again, maybe it's sort of that sneaky part of the season when teams are trying to decide, how they're going to be doing, trying to establish that rapport. But I like how Calgary came to the game last week against Hamilton. Toronto, again, don't get me wrong. I think Toronto's going to be, we're going to hear from them by the end of the season. But it's, Grey Cup champions. They've had some roster adjustments. There'll be 6,000 fans in the stands. I'm not trying to poke fun at Toronto, but it's not like a huge home field advantage like playing in Winnipeg. I got Calgary by a field goal over the Argos.
So I don't know what they call it now. It used to be Tim Hortons Field. It's not Tim Hortons Field. I have no idea if they've got some different naming rights. I never even checked that out. But the Tiger Cats taking on the Riders. Bo Levi Mitchell had over 300 yards passing, or around 300, but a lot of that was in quote-unquote garbage time when they were trying to catch up from behind. If Hamilton starts lethargic like they did against Calgary, they're going to get smoked by the Riders. It's never easy to go east and play in Hamilton. We used to call it Never Win Stadium for the Riders when it was Ivor Win Stadium. The only game I ever called there, the Riders got beat by the Tiger Cats. I got the Riders winning. I think I got the Riders by 8 to 10 points in this one. If they can just play sound football, they should win. But they're going to have to tighten up that secondary.
Yeah, Ballsy, maybe it's me being sort of the stats geek nerd guy who also is superstitious. I hate picking the Riders to win, but I got the Riders in a very close game against Hamilton. To me, we should beat them. I think we're a better team, obviously, on paper. But if you think back to last year's game, we escaped last year with a win, scored 10 points in the last 35 seconds of the game. I think the Riders, Harris can control the ball in terms of pinpoint passing. I think we'll have enough to be able to move the ball against the Hamilton defense. Again, I think a close game, but I see the Riders emerging 24-21.
Yeah, that's I see it a little bit more lopsided, but definitely, teams always get up for their home openers too. Mm-hmm. Last thing here, you're a numbers guy, but you got a personality and you get the game. I asked Eddie Steele this and Baba O'Neill, broadcaster for the in Edmonton and Hamilton, respectively. So Hamilton scores a touchdown, and instead of kicking the extra point and just being down by 8, they try to go for 2, and then they're down by 9. What do you... Like, when you're watching that or see that, what are you, as a numbers guy, think? I don't get that, man. Like, what are you doing?
Good point. I think, to me, that 9 point, when you're trailing by 9, that's such a rough number because it's no longer a one-possession game. I think as a CFL team, any sports team, you want to get to that one-possession stage. That's a situation where you scratch your head. But, again, maybe the coach is looking at flow of the game, momentum. Maybe they've got a package in play that they can get the 2-point conversion and make it to then – make it a 7-point game, and then they're closer, and then maybe they get a touchdown 2-point conversion, and they're ahead. But I've learned a long time ago that analytics can say one thing, but football coaches and any sporting manager coach is driven by the emotion of the moment, looking at the flow, looking at momentum, and trying to see how they can make the best decision. But it does scratch your head in terms of that 9-point disadvantage can be really challenging.
Well, and you bring up the point that I wanted to really accentuate here, because you're right. You can go analytics and it screws things up, or you can go maybe sometimes emotionally. But you got to marry the two. Like, there was still enough time on the clock where you didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And number two, doesn't it psychologically give you you kick the extra point. Now you're like, okay, we only need a touchdown and 2 points. We're still in this game. If you miss it, now we're down by 9. Now we gotta get the ball back. We gotta get 2 scores. To me, that didn't make a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I think it's psychologically deflating for Hamilton, and recognizing, basically now they're really uphill. Because, yes, there's still time left, but now it's a 2-possession situation as opposed to the 1-possession game.
All right, man. Well, it's going to be interesting. So you've got, let's revisit, you got Winnipeg, and oddly enough, I got BC. I've got Saskatchewan, you've got Saskatchewan. I've got Calgary, you've got Calgary, and you've got Ottawa, and I've got Montreal. So we differ on 2. We'll see who's the smartest. Well, you're normally the smartest, but we'll see if I can match your smarts football-wise this week.
Will do. Thanks, Ballsy.
Appreciate it. Take care,
Riders.
Well, we call this segment Airing It Out with former CFL quarterback Isaac Harker. How are you, bud?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good, man. Love that smiley young face. So, you're in St. Louis. You guys have had some wacky weather there.
Oh man, there's been some tornadoes that have kind of ripped through and torn up some businesses and houses. So it's been wild.
I've only been caught in a couple tornadoes here in Regina. One time I was a 5-year-old boy looking out the back window, and my dad was in the garage, and my mom was calling him in for supper, and he never made it in. He was trapped in the garage. Imagine this 5-year-old watching your dad trapped in a garage while the neighbor's garage gets picked up and put over our garage two houses down. We only lost a couple of shingles, but so I've been in do you have like a traumatic story like that, or do you go, like, where do you hide when things are going on? What happens in St. Louis?
Yeah, we got a basement here, so we pretty much just take shelter down there and bring some flashlights and all that. So nothing too crazy like that, but that's crazy.
Do they have, like, because I was talking to Kyrie Zaber, he's in Oklahoma. He helps me on the postgame show, former Alouette and Bomber and stuff. He said the horns are going off. We have to go underneath for a tornado. Do you guys have like horns and stuff there, like sirens or anything like that?
It just pings our phone with some message like you are in a pretty close path, so get some shelter, stay away from windows and that.
Hey, so I have said if the CFL is going to kind of get a little extra juice, they're eventually going to have to expand. And I said maybe look again at United States expansion like they did in the mid-'90s, maybe kind of northern border states like North Dakota, maybe Oregon with Portland, Montana maybe. But I also said St. Louis would be a great city because St. Louis is showing that no matter what football is there, they'll support it. I don't know how much longer that UFL is going to work out, to be quite honest with you. But I don't know. Do you think CFL football could work in St. Louis?
Oh, yeah. They're crazy about all professional sports. The most ride-or-die fans you'll see in a city, and they support the Battlehawks like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I'm not sure how long the UFL is planning on going their way, but they got some good TV deals, so they could probably make it through quite a bit. But I think a CFL team would thrive here and would pack the house.
So are you playing You were Arena League. Did you take a year off? Are you done football? What's your deal right now?
I took this year off. I'm not sure. It'd have to be a pretty enticing offer to go back and play some indoor football again. But I'm done with the CFL, XFL, NFL stuff. It's like if an indoor arena football team would come calling with a good offer, I might listen.
So would you be into coaching, or what are you doing now with your time? I know you're busy with you were busy with the project that we can't talk about for a bit, but we will sometime in the fall, and we know what it's all about. So it was a cool project. But besides that, what are you doing right now, Isaac?
Yeah, we'll be able to talk about that right at the end of September. So I'm excited for that. But for now, I'm working with Lindenwood University. They're located in St. Charles, Missouri. They're a 1AA team in the Ohio Valley, and I'm selling sponsorships for them and for their athletic program. So it's been fun.
All right. I'm selling cars over at Crestview here in Regina. What do you like best about selling?
It's fun to just meet business owners from various verticals and get to know them and their story and figure out their tie to athletics and like academic institutions, because they want to support any way they can. So it's fun to see kind of their stories. What's
the worst part for me? It's I'm used to rejection. Like, I'm used to people being rude when I'm doing call-in shows and stuff. So that's no big deal. But I guess it's uncomfortable to ask people for their money. I guess I would say.
I think we're right in line, because rejection, being a 6 foot flat, 185-pound quarterback, I've faced plenty of rejection in my life, so I've got no problem with that. But yeah, it's definitely different. It's a different capacity of like dealing with people's money and wanting to do right by them when you're taking their money for support and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk a little football here going into week 2 of the CFL. How tough is it for an American looking to crack a roster when it's a short training camp and only 2 preseason games? I know the CFL is a long season. The NFL is looking to go 18 regular season games. We've been doing that for a while. And then we've got the 2 preseason games. But I feel like it's kind of a short window for Americans to really catch an eye, to get the game down. And it would be hard for a quarterback too, I would think.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people think, oh, it's going to be harder for an American to crack the roster because of the national rules with the ratio, 21 nationals versus 19 Americans. The quarterbacks is just separate, kind of its own separate deal, so that doesn't come into play. But for the most part, the national talent versus the American talent, there's loads of talent everywhere. So you're going to have to face that whether you're in the CFL or the NFL, facing great guys. But the main thing for Americans is coming in. It's such a short preseason. You only get 2 preseason games, so getting used to the new style of game, because it's really completely different from American football, like the spacing, understanding the timing of how things are happening. It's just so different. It takes a while to get used to, so you really got to get your feet wet in training camp and learn and adapt quickly.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Nathan Rourke was great in 2022. Then he went and tried to catch on with an NFL team and did, and pursue that dream. But he bounced from this team to that team to this team, and he came back to the CFL. And I think he had a bit of a hangover last year because, you know what, he's a human. He wants to play. The NFL is the cream of the crop. I love the CFL. I think it's a great league. It's my favorite league, my favorite form of football. But let's be honest, that's where the dollars are there and all the glamour. So any young 20-something-year-old would be pumped to do that. But there is a bit of a hangover when you're rejected, so to speak, as we talked rejection a few minutes ago. But I think there's more to it this way, and you can speak to it because you played the position. Just talk about the different offenses that was in his head. He goes back to BC, an offense he's familiar with, but it's more than that. It's timing, it's the routes, it's the size of the field, it's the spacing.
Yeah, and obviously I've never been at the NFL level like him, but I've been in 8-man football in the arena, 11-man in the States, and then the CFL. And it is such a different headspace you have to put yourself in for each type of game. The CFL, a lot of it is feel-based and understanding space. Like you're throwing to space, you're feeling it. Where NFL, I'm assuming, I haven't played at that level, but an arena is like timing. It's laser, 1, 2, 3, ball is out, and it's to this specific spot, where the CFL feels like a lot more playmaking and feeling space. So, and not to mention, the verbiage of going from 12-man football to NFL playbooks, West Coast offense. I don't know who he was under Doug Peterson in Jacksonville. So, yeah, there's so much that goes on in your head. He's doing really well, and I think he's primed for a bounce back season. But I'm sure it just took him a minute to, get back into the CFL frame of mind and get into gear.
Yeah, so Isaac Harker, what's harder then? I know you didn't play at the NFL level, but you did play 11-man football. Is it harder to quarterback 11-man football where it's bang, bang, out? Or is it harder to kind of let the play develop and be a bit more of a playmaker in the CFL, in your opinion?
Yeah, speaking personally, for me, it was much harder in the CFL trying to feel things out and kind of be a gunslinger at times and throw into space, because that's just not really how I'm wired. I'm more of the let's get it out on time. Let's have the pre-snap reads and everything. Where the CFL, there's still a lot of that involved. Don't get me wrong. It's not like you're going out there Brett Favre'ing it every time you drop back. But it's definitely was harder for me. And Nate is so good. I mean, you saw him have success in the preseason in the NFL and loads of success in the CFL. So I'm sure it's just taking him a second because he's a great player.
So Drew Brown is not going to play for Ottawa this week. He was hurt in the game against Saskatchewan, an emerging young guy, as you were at one point in this league. Not that you're old, but you know what I mean. So now Matthew Schultz gets to go in. But what's it like, take me through the scenario, because you went through it. Simone Lawrence tried to kill Zach Collaros in that first game of the 2019 season, and then you and Cody Fajardo come off the bench, and actually you looked more comfortable than Cody Fajardo did, to be quite honest with you, and I even remarked on that on the post-game show. But what's it like during the week? You don't get many reps as a backup quarterback. People think you get equal reps. You don't get a lot of reps. You're standing on the sidelines, and boom, all of a sudden the guy goes down, and you got to go in.
Yeah, it's definitely different than like college, where one guy gets a scout team, and then the 1 and 2 guys are splitting reps during the week. It's like, if there's 20 reps, there's about 18 of them go to the starter, and then the backup will take 1 or 2. So preparation's a tough enough thing when you're getting the reps, like 18, 90% of the reps, But when you're the backup, you really got to focus on alternative methods to get prepared, standing in the back and going through it as the play's developing so that you can see where your decision would have been. But then also visualization comes into play. It's definitely something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think it's huge. So when he's going to get all the reps this week, so that's going to be big for Schultz.
So just talk about a good quarterback room. Like, Kolaros was there, and then you got you and Cody. What's it like to be the backup? What's your main role generally? If you're not playing, what's your main role to help out that starter when he comes to the sidelines?
Yeah, my main role would get done the 6 days in between games because I was a big guy trying to find tells in the defense that would tip off differences in coverage. Like, it's going to be hold if he's within 8 yards and he's cocked 45 degrees, it's hold 90% of the time. So that's a big tell. Like, just making it easier for them to get pre-snap reads was my main goal. And then on the sidelines, it just kind of depends on the guy. Calero's coming over. I won't talk to him the same way that I would talk to Cody just because they're different people and they got different things they want to get done on the sidelines. So kind of having that emotional intelligence to just know what they need in the moment to succeed the next time they're going out on the field for a drive.
What's Kolaros like? He's been a 2-time MOP. He's been suspended stupidly because he didn't answer his phone, and it was a 2-game suspension, but a 1-game suspension for not adhering to the drug test when they called him. But what's he like as a leader, as a quarterback? Just give me some thoughts on him. I never asked you that before.
Yeah, I really like him as a person. He's first and foremost, he's a really cool dude. He likes talking about music and being one of the boys, but when he's in football mode, he's always locked in, and he had some of the best kind of tips and tricks for diagnosing defenses when I was coming up because he just thought of it so differently than me, where I would get so focused on the trees that I might lose the forest, and he would kind of teach me how to zoom out a little bit and see the bigger picture when it came to diagnosing man zone. He's like, that was one of his biggest things was if I can tell if it's man or zone before the play, I'm locked in. Where I was like trying to figure out, it's hold cut or it's this, that. He's like, it's zone. So I think he's just got such good instincts on the field too. He's a really fun guy to watch, and if you show that you're very involved and interested, he'll teach you everything you want to know too, which is really cool.
So, and that's good because some starters don't want to do that because they're afraid you're going to take their job. Now, I'm not saying he would have been I'm not saying you weren't talented, but he probably wasn't afraid of losing his job to you or Cody. But some guys aren't like that. Like you hear sometimes Brett Favre you mentioned Favre. He didn't want to mentor Aaron Rodgers because it was going to be his replacement. I'm hearing Aaron Rodgers is a pretty good dude. That way. I've talked to other quarterbacks that have played with him, and they say no, he's a pretty good dude this way. So that's good to know, and that's good to hear. Give me an example. Like, give me one tip he would tell you. It's not going to ruin any game plans. Like, what would he say? Hey, you got to watch this guy, or this person, or this formation. It's man or zone.
Yeah. So one of the bigger things was I was talking to him. I remember one time in the quarterback room. I was talking, when we're motioning so many people, it's hard to track each individual player that's moving with the motion. And he kind of told me that he doesn't really look at one individual guy when there's a bunch of motion. He's looking at like snapshots before and after to give him inputs because sometimes even if they're chasing the motion, it ends up being zone still. Mm-hmm. So he always talked about body language. And that was one big thing I took from him was, it makes sense that you can get tricked by them chasing the motion, but if you look at their body language, you'll fall into place.
So if an average guy, I'm just throwing this out here, if an average player watches 3 hours or 5 hours of film, a good quarterback, how much film does he have to watch, do you think? Because that's the most important position in North American sports, let's be honest.
Yeah, from guy to guy, it'll depend. If a guy is more... he's got more of the Brett Favre in him. He'll play better when he watches less film and doesn't get too locked into whatever's going on. He's just feeling the game. But a good quarterback, a lot of the best ones I've seen are usually the first in the building and the last out, and that's because they're just consuming so much film during the week that they just know every contingency that's going to happen on game day.
So you can talk about this. I think it's great. So Trevor Harris was talking about the fact he's with Mark Mueller now back-to-back seasons as his offensive coordinator, and that hasn't happened for a while. and maybe not ever as a starting guy. Like, it's a lot of rotation. So just talk about that chemistry and that comfortability that the quarterback has with the OC and the offense, and how big that can be for Trevor Harris and the Riders this year.
I've met Trevor here and there, but I don't know him like super personally. But he seems like the kind of guy who, when an offensive coordinator is rolling over into the next season, it's going to make a big difference because he's so analytical. Mm-hmm. One thing you would worry about in the NFL is changes in verbiage and like play calling and the actual words you're saying. But in the CFL, I don't think that that's too big of a difference. But what does make a difference is that connection you have with the offensive coordinator, them knowing your preferences and you knowing what they're about to call. So you're already kind of preparing for the call in your head, and then bang, it comes in and you knew exactly what he was going to call. So I think he's going to be feeling very comfortable and confident.
So Mark was a high-level U Sports quarterback here with the Rams, had a cup of coffee, at least in training camp and preseason, with Edmonton, the Eskimos back in the day. Nathan Rourke is working with Buck Pierce as who's been an OC for a long time, first-year head coach, but a guy who also played in this league the same position. How much does that help a quarterback to either have a quarterback coach that you can that's kind of your coach / counselor, where you can vent to him, that's not a fellow player, or an OC or a head coach that's been in the same shoes that you're wearing right now on the field?
It's definitely big, because sometimes, especially in film study, it's funny because you'll run into coaches here and there who, after you've thrown the ball, they'll pause it. Look at this guy, he's wide open, and you're just thinking to yourself, like, that's because the ball is already out and I've thrown it. So the play is essentially over for the guys on the other side of the field, you know? But people who have played, they know how sometimes having conviction in your decision, even if it's not the perfect decision for that play, is better than being wishy-washy and trying to make the perfect decision every time you drop back. So having that understanding that a quarterback's never going to have a perfect game, and there's always going to be things that from play to play will affect the outcome, it's big to have that in your corner. Okay,
before I let you go in our first installment of Airing It Out with Isaac Harker, Isaac, coming up here, what was the toughest throw for you to master?
This is going to sound cliche, but the field corner. So It's just a corner out coming from the wide side of the field, and the field being 65 wide as opposed to 53, and with the head start of the motion, it's just such a longer throw than you see, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not an issue of getting it all the way out there, but it's being able to understand exactly how far you need to put it out with that head start in terms of speeding up your feet and getting that ball out early.
Yeah. You got to get rid of it faster, right? Because if it's a split second later, then that gives the DB a chance to close, and you can't really use that wide open, like the real estate that's out there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you just have to become accustomed to, when the ball is snapped, he is at a dead sprint because of the waggle. So he's not wasting any time accelerating. He's already, boom, at top speed. Yeah. So you just got to speed everything up a little bit.
Well, you know what else it would be interesting for a guy like you? You get down in the score zone, okay? And in the American game, you got a 10-yard end zone, so it's really condensed and tight in there. In the CFL, you still, if you're at the 10-yard line or even the 5-yard line, you still can have every one of your route trees. You might have to, the route accommodations, you just have to shorten them up a bit, but it's almost like trying to cover it on a tarmac if you're a defensive back.
Yeah, that they're insane athletes for being able to keep up, especially in the red zone. But you're right, the offense has the whole playbook in front of them, minus one or two routes, and you have the ability to use the field goal post as a natural pick as well. So there's a lot for a defense to think about down there. The offense is just business as usual. Just don't hit.
Yeah, don't hit the post like Cody did. Yeah, that was the one that hurt. Yeah, that's right. But let me ask you that on that note: do you favor that or the post at the back? I don't want to see anything change, but for the quarterback, do you like that? It can be used as a pick, or it can be an impediment like we saw in the West Final.
Yeah, for offensive purposes, I'd like to have it in the back, but for the special teams game, it's so fun to have it in the front, because that's the biggest mismatch in sports. A missed field goal, you got your 4-4-40 guy back there against a lot of linemen who are blocking for the kick, but yeah, that's something people work on during the week. Like, if we're going to run this route in this in the scoring area, you're going to have to change your throw a little bit. It's a little something extra to think about as a quarterback, and you don't always want to be thinking about anything extra when you're back there.
So I've never asked this to anybody actually. So what was that? What was that like? What was that like? Like, it's funny. It's a game of inches. If you don't hit the goal, if you don't hit the crossbar there, it's a touchdown. The Riders win, go to the Grey Cup, and maybe there's no Winnipeg, quote unquote, dynasty. They've never missed a Grey Cup since Zach Collaros went to Winnipeg. They've been in all 5 Grey Cups since he's been there, which is remarkable. I know they've only won 2. Part of it last year was that he had the hand that was stitched up and numb and couldn't feel the ball. We could talk about that another installment. But what was it like going back to the locker room there and, you were that close and that damn crossbar got in the way?
Yeah, and it's kind of an odd thing to think about because sometimes people can blame a kicker for missing, the go-ahead field goal when you're down 1 or something of that nature. Someone drops a ball in the end zone, but there's really no one to blame, right? Because with wind conditions and everything, with the rush bearing down, you're having to read the coverage. There's no way that you can really guide it around the post. It was just there, and he made the throw he needed to make. It would have been right in stride, So you can't blame anybody. It's just the post.
So I don't know. Like, I'm kind of conflicted as it relates to Cody Fajardo. That game, I don't think you'll find a guy tougher in the league than Cody Fajardo. Like, he was dealing with injuries as everybody was, but he was banged up in that game. And in subsequent years with the O-line problems, he took a lot of shots. He goes to Montreal, and he's good, not great, until they get to the Grey Cup, and then he plays the game of his life, and they win as the epic speech, so kudos to him, right? Like, you can't take that away from him. But then he's pushed out, and he goes to Edmonton. So I don't know if he's elite. I know he's above average, and he's a Grey Cup winning quarterback as a starter. What do you make of him going to Edmonton? That's kind of interesting because he goes to Edmonton to back up Trey Ford, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson goes from Edmonton to back up Davis Alexander in Montreal. It's like 2 established guys are now backups in different cities and seem to be okay with it right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, and I don't know if this was ever a point was ever made of this, but I don't think people know how hurt he was in that West Final that he was playing against Winnipeg, because he was hurting bad, but he would never, let it out there or make an excuse or anything, because he's just, like you said, he's tough as nails and a great player. And it was cool to see him transition from West to East and then win a Grey Cup with Coach Moss, who I love that guy too. So it was really fun to see them go out and win it. But yeah, going to Edmonton, I saw him score 2 touchdowns. He's definitely the short yardage GOAT of the CFL. He never is denied on the short yardage plays.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's not exactly a huge guy either. Like, you see some of these guys like Strevler in Winnipeg or Tommy Stevens in Regina now with the Riders of Saskatchewan. He doesn't get stopped, but Cody doesn't get stopped either. It's kind of interesting that way. Last one here since I got you. Jason Moss. Why is he a good coach for a young quarterback? Like, back in the Edmonton days before you were in the league, he was a bit of a spaz on the sidelines, throwing stuff and getting mad yelling at the Gatorade can. But in Saskatchewan, he was more even-tempered as the OC, and then, of course, we know what he's done in Montreal so far. Why will Davis Alexander benefit from Jason Moss?
Yeah, there's not a better guy to be around in the league than Coach Moss as a young quarterback, and you won't find a guy who loves football and is more passionate about football and treating it with respect and playing the game the way it should be played and everything than he is. And as a leader especially, he's a sponge for negativity, and he deflects all praise onto his quarterback. So it's very freeing to not have to worry about that. And I think he takes a lot off your shoulders because he's seen a lot of the game, and he's, an offensive genius too with the play calling. So I think Davis will be all right over there.
And another guy that played at a high level at the position, of course, with Edmonton, he was 1-2, him and Ricky Ray. So he knows what it's like to take the criticism and to have to grind and scratch and claw, right?
Exactly, yeah, because he was arguably the best quarterback in the league, and at times was sitting behind Ricky Ray. So he knows what that dynamic is like too, wanting to play, but also having, supporting your friend at the end of the day who's playing really well too. So he's a really cool guy.
Hey, man, when you're not a good-looking guy, you get good-looking guests on that are smart and can put sentences together, so I appreciate it. Can we do this again sometime soon?
Absolutely. Let's lock it in.
Isaac Harker, airing it out. Frank McCrystal, Hall of Famer. How does that sound?
It sounds a little odd, but yeah, it's I think a really nice thing for the football program, for the Regina Rams. You know, we have other Rams that are in there, inclusive of Roger Aldag, for example, and obviously Gord Curry, and you know, Jim Hobson's in there. He's a Regina Ram. I know he probably more for what he did with the Riders.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really nice to again have the program there.
Yeah, it certainly is. And actually, Jim and I, before he passed away, we had a nice lunch at his lake. We talked about all that stuff, and we talked about. I said, I hope Frank McCrystal gets into this thing before he dies, and we both laughed. and he said, I hope I'm around to see it. Obviously, he's not. But when you look back on your career, like, what comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about, you know, being a coach for all those years?
Coach, I don't know. You know, I have other guys, and I've been through like a zillion over 40 some years interviews. I think it's going to be kind of cliche in where you suggest that it's the people, but it really is the people. I've never found X's and O's to be hard to do. I thought the X's and O's of the game is not really too tough. And I mean, certainly there's things here and there that you do and have some success or maybe not. But I think really what's been most important is the opportunity I've had to be around good people, solid people, people of all aspects of the program, from the players themselves, Jason Claremont, Daryl Leeson, Roger Aldag, some really great people that have gone on and played in the NFL, like a Johnny Ryan, for example. But then also coaches like Bernie Schmidt, who's a major part of the success of the Rams over the last 40 years. Bernie Schmidt, Jerry Orban, Rick Seaman, guys that, I coached with for 30 plus years. And then there's the directors that have been directors and fundraisers for the program, Doug McKillop and Paul Barnaby and Ed Mankowski. And those guys were around in the 1980s. Paul Barnaby was a team manager in 1978. So to be associated and be hanging around with those guys and to still have relationships and friendships with those guys over decades, literally decades, it's been pretty important, valued part of the experience.
I want to touch on some of those names you talked about because, like you said, this is kind of it's a program award, a program that you were a big part of for a number of years, but it wasn't just you. But, I that's what I would say. I'm glad you brought that up. I thought coaching for you, the X's and O's, was boring. Like, that was the boring part. Like, that was my perception as a player. Like, I'm not saying, I always said this to people. Frank's not a coach. Like, he's not a coach. He's like a coach / GM. Like, he knows what classes you're taking. He knows where you're working. For instance, when I'm in junior football, he knows your family. He knows all that stuff. To me, coaching, that X's and O's was boring, kind of boring for you. You needed something more. Am I right when I say that?
I think that's right. I thought the real challenge is not so much the X's and O's. I mean, if you're going to put Akeem Hicks up with a 5'10", 210-pound offensive lineman, Akeem Hicks is going to win. Mm-hmm. What was most important was getting the right person in the right place, doing the right thing. And when you do those things, you put Neil Hughes back returning kickoffs and punts. Make sure that Jason Claremont's getting the ball down in the goal line when you're short yardage and, it's double overtime against Kelowna, and who are you going to give the ball to? Make sure that guy, his hands. Or, you see someone like Johnny Ryan, who I always wanted to try to give a break to because he kicked field goals, he kicked converts, he did kickoffs. He was a starting wide receiver. He punted. And if I tried to take any one of those things away, he would get upset. He was upset about that. So, I mean, in Saskatoon, he scores a 90-yard touchdown, kicks the convert, goes back and does the kickoff. It just, those kinds of things, and providing the opportunity for people to excel and to realize their potential, I think that's the real excitement and the real challenge to coach.
You talked about some of those names, and I think it's important to bring some of those names back up here. So Bankowski, Barnaby, McKillop, those are guys that never had kids that played on the team, and it was because of guys like that I got to play, and they really, like, they had a high give a shit factor, which is really cool.
They're like so invested in the program, like really. Paul Barnaby comes here from Timmins, Ontario. He's working for Sask Lotteries, and he's the team manager in 1978. Doug McKillop, we needed a treasurer, and so in 1982, I go to Doug McKillop's house, a guy that I'd known since I was 10 years old, and say, "Hey, Doug, how do you feel about doing this?" Doug McKillop is still involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's meetings. Ed Bankowski was the team manager, and ended up. He was a president. All three of those guys ended up being team presidents. Ed Bankowski, and he still sells 50/50s. And the exciting thing for Ed is that he got a new hearing aid. He has a hearing aid, and he can hear now. Takes a little bit, detracts a little bit from our meetings because when we leave our coffee and I say, "Goodbye, Ed, you old son of a bitch," now he can hear me. Before he used to just wave and say, "Oh yeah, see you, friend." That was a little disappointing. But I mean, they're still involved. Like, he's still selling 50/50s alongside Tim Huber, who played on the Rams in the late 80s and early 90s.
Mm-hmm. So, listen, no disrespect to the Rick Siemens of the world, the Jerry Orbans, who has departed, was a great O-line coach and a good support of yours, other great coaches. But we got the Oilers in the hockey playoffs, and I think Connor McDavid and I think Leon Draisaitl. If you're Connor McDavid in this play, then you're Leon Draisaitl as Bernie Schmidt. So when you go in here, to me, it's like you can't put two guys in, but if you could put two guys in under one bust, it would be Frank and Bernie, in my opinion.
I mean, we brought the Rams brought Bernie onto the coaching staff in 1982, and Jerry Sabitniak was the head coach then. And I said, "Hey, I think I got a guy that can really help us, as a coach." And Bernie ended up at that time in 1983 coaching DBs, and so. When I became the head coach in 1984, it was a thing where I said, "Hey, Bernie, let's, you take the offense and you do the offense." So there's no question that he's been a huge part of the team and the program and what we've been able to accomplish.
So you're a guy that doesn't live with a lot of regrets. At least that's what you always preach to us. But I just wonder, like, that the first year you get into the league, the U Sports or CIS or whatever they call it, and you go 0-8. Okay. The next year, you guys go to the Vanier Cup, and I don't want to say you lost. I think you ran out of time. That's how I want to look at it. You ran just short of time. You had a couple of injuries, Claremont being one of them. If you do have a regret, is that one of them, getting that far and not pushing it over the finish line?
There's time. There's other times through that period that we could have won. I mean, I think it was 2013. We lost Mueller in the first game of the season. For the season. That hurt us. It was 42-39, that Vanier Cup 2000. We ran out of steam. We played on the road through the playoffs. We went to St. Mary's, won the Atlantic Bowl. We went to Manitoba and beat Manitoba in Winnipeg. And then we had to go to the Maritimes, had to go to Halifax, and then came back home, and then ended up going to Toronto to play. Where Ottawa just kind of, they could have come to the game on mopeds. Flying and all over the place. I think we had to bus to Winnipeg and fly to Halifax. So it was, and we lost. Jason Claremont scores a 2-point convert with a broken collarbone. Like he's unbelievable, and what our players did was really unbelievable. I said when we got back that the team of the year in 2000 was actually the Regina Rams, and we might have actually got that title if we had won the Vanier that year.
Mm-hmm. So you've had so many great things happen in your career, of course, culminating here with the Canadian Football Hall induction, which is going to be great. So they're going to do a bust of you? And if they do a bust of you, are you going to grow a mustache and put a toque on, dude?
I thought about both of those things. Yeah, doing them. Daryl Davis called me and let me know this, and I was out for a walk, and he says, "Oh yeah, they're doing a bust, and they do a jacket and everything." I go, "Wow, wait, I guess I probably should walk another 15, 20 minutes more than I usually walk now." Like I thought about, I know a lot of the stuff and pictures that are up and around the clubhouse and things like that. I'm in a toque, so I thought about that, but no, they take things very seriously. The Hall of Fame, no toque, and I'm not even sure. I don't think they have you take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think I wore glasses. So
okay.
You're right. I should have the stash, and I didn't.
Okay. Lastly, before I let you go here. So there's been so many, like all the championships in junior football to the point where you needed to move on to something else because let's be honest, it got boring. Okay. So the next challenge was starting a university program in little old Saskatchewan, getting to the Vanier Cup your second year, having all those players, not just in the CFL, but the NFL, and having actual pro teams come around and say, this is the best run, most, I talked to CFL guys. When I showed up at a Frank McCrystal run practice, I knew who all the guys were. I knew who I was looking for. They just love the professionalism of your program. Is there one thing you're most proud of, or is it just all encompassing?
I don't really think about that. I don't know. I think that we accomplished some great things with our people. And, I'll leave you out of it for a second. But, when you look at, like, certainly the guys that played in the NFL, but I look at, an Alex Meldrum that's, he's a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon. I look at what Mike Thomas has accomplished with Football Sask and what he does with flag football. I'm really proud of, Brett Jones. Brett Jones gave up. He said, I want to be a doctor. And he battled and finally got into med school. And he wants to be a doctor, he says, because I want to give something back to the community. I don't want to be a specialist. I don't want to be a surgeon. I want to be a GP because I want to give something to the community. You look at guys like Mark Mueller, Brendan Owens, his own business. I'm really, really proud of what they accomplished, not only our junior players, our university players, but the program as a whole, what it's allowed guys to do.
So Brian Towers went in as the all-time winningest coach, and when he went in, I'm not gonna lie to you, I got on the horn, I got the papers, I said, I got to get this guy, into the hall, because I said, this guy here has more wins than Brian Towers combined if you go junior and U sports. Frank McCrystal ruined Brian Towers' university career when he brought the Rams, because let's be honest, Brian, I like Brian Towers, but he didn't win a championship after you brought the Rams to Can West or whatever they were calling it then. And I mean, come on, this guy deserves to be there. I was so pumped to hear when you called me and said, hey, I'm going in, and that well deserved. And I know you don't like to take the accolades for yourself. Here's something some people don't really get, and this is what I've talked to other guys like the Joel Lipinskis and other guys that have played with other programs, and they said one thing about Frank is it's about the players. Like, yes, we like the program, the Rams, but it's about the people. Like, you have the American kids, like Akeem Hicks and all the out-of-town guys come to your house for Thanksgiving or Christmas caroling and stuff. That's really what you're all about. Like, it's not so much the wins and losses, right? Those come and go.
Even the design of our clubhouse, and the design of the clubhouse when we went to the university, in the middle with everything around it, weight room, physio room, offices, meeting rooms, everything was around the middle. Well, it was around the dressing room. So the middle of all of those things. And that's what I really believe, that it's about the players.
Hey, and the other thing is, so I put the paperwork in about 6 years ago, and then 2 years ago I called to say, like, is he getting in? And they're like, no, it's he's in the queue. I said, well, can he do it before he dies? Can we have the guy in before he dies?
Well, I'm 71, so I've got my fingers crossed until.
I'm not, you're not dying. You're great, man. Listen, this is great. I love chatting with you. Can't wait to see you get your just due. And once again, it's a lot of people behind the scenes, but you were the face of that program for a number of years. So thanks for all you did.
I appreciate everything you do and all the support. And I've missed our talks.
Awesome, bro. Thanks. I appreciate it.